No. Well, so here's the thing. All right. I've been just a huge fan of Nier Automata since a couple years after it came out. I was a little late to the game, but I was still impressed with it either way. I played it non-stop, got all of the endings, enjoyed every single minute of it. And just, I don't know, a couple of months ago, they decided to re-release the prequel to Nier Automata, Nier Replicant. And I thought, you know what? I'd really like to play this, but now that I've gotten more invested in this series, now that I know that there's this expanded world that's out there, I want to try and get as much clarity on what's going on as I can. And I decided about a month before Replicant came out that I wanted to play through the entirety of the first game in the series that directly relates to Nier Replicant. And that was Drakengard. Now, for those of you who are curious and genuinely know nothing about this series, Nier is a much larger universe than what you would first expect. Because not only is any game with the word Nier involved in this series, but there's also a separate series called Drakengard that also takes place in the same universe. Drakengard, as a series, the timeline for it doesn't make any sense. So the first game chronologically is Drakengard 3. The second game is a direct sequel to one of the endings of the original Drakengard, and then Nier Replicant is a sequel to the final ending that is also the hardest ending in the game to get. With Nier Replicant right around the corner, I thought it was a good idea to go back and play Drakengard to give me some context and help me understand the world better than what I already had from basically reading a few Wikipedia articles and playing through all of the endings for Nier Automata multiple times. Now, this series as a whole is extremely dense, and by that I mean there's more to it than just the Drakengard series and the Nier series. There's also everything in between, which includes light novels, manga, theater shows that have only ever taken place in Japan, in Japanese. So maybe there's fan translations out there. I'm not going to hunt them down, but I thought the best thing that I could do to help prepare is just, at the very least, play the game that takes place directly before Replicant did. So, Drakengard. Now, my initial feelings on Drakengard have not changed since the first time I've played it, because I actually played this game when it first released. I have had this copy of this game sitting on a shelf somewhere in my basement for over a decade. I have looked at this game, thought about playing it, and then never did. I put it into the PlayStation one time, and I looked at the first level, and I just thought to myself, this is it? Because you have to understand, like, this was the PlayStation 2, and this game was by no means bad looking, but, like, to me, a PlayStation 2 game looked like Kingdom Hearts, right? Beautiful worlds, amazing character design, these crazy animated sequences, amazing combat. Some of the best combat is in Kingdom Hearts 2. Like, it's some of my favorite. And part of what I loved about Nier Automata was that same style of combat was kind of in there, where it was like this real-time RPG type feel. So I had all of these expectations built up on, like, what a game with this kind of look and this kind of style should feel like. And I turned it on, I booted it up, I jumped in, and was immediately disappointed. I walked around, I tried fighting a few enemies. I didn't really get very far at all. I want to say I only played it for like 7 minutes or something like that. And it just didn't feel satisfying, even back then. So, back on the shelf it went, and I didn't think about it for literally 10 years. It wasn't until Replicant got announced that I truly understood that it was even related to Drakengard at all. So color me surprised when I actually had the very first game in a series that I've suddenly found that I enjoy very much. And I decided, you know what? I'll give it another shot. Maybe this time will be different. It went way worse than I ever thought it would. Before going any further, there's one question that I want to get out of the way. Do you need to play Drakengard? No, not at all. Despite being the prequel to Nier, Drakengard has almost nothing to do with Nier, aside from the final ending. You could play nothing else except for the final cutscene of the game, and you would have all the context you need to go into Nier. Now, are there little bits of lore and missing details that you might miss out on? Yeah, probably. But having been someone who has played through the entire game, they don't really seem to give that much context anyway. If you want to, and I don't blame you, you can go onto YouTube right now and type in Drakengard ending E or final ending cutscene for Drakengard and get all of the context you need to go further into this series without ever even touching the game. I only did this as a fun little challenge for myself, and I genuinely regret doing it. Now, with that out of the way, spoilers from here on out. If you're interested in playing the game all the way through from beginning to end, this is your jumping off point. If you want to, feel free to come back afterwards. We can compare notes. I'm fully okay with that. You know, maybe you liked it. Tell me why you liked it. I would really like to see somebody else's perspective on this game because honestly, it's really hard for me to find those redeeming qualities. Drakengard is a story about an angry, angry boy by the name of Kaim? Kaim?
I am Kaim.
Kaim, who's really mad about everything all the time. Non-stop. At first, he's mad because his parents were killed by a dragon. Now he's mad because a neighboring empire has decided to invade and kidnap his sister Furiae, who has been given the title of goddess. With his home under siege, Kaim does his best to recapture the castle and meet up with his sister and her fiancé, Inuart. On his way there, a wounded dragon happens to be just knocked the F out in the courtyard. Kaim initially wants to kill this dragon before thinking better and decides to make a pact with it, leading to their two souls being bonded, kind of like Dragonheart. In return for the power of the dragon, Kaim sacrifices his voice, more hubbub occurs, your princess is in another castle, blah blah blah, and then boom, adventure. From here, the game is played in chapters with verses of 3 different types. So you have aerial combat, you have ground combat, and you have cutscenes. Aerial combat is by far the funnest part of the game. You ride on your dragon in a large map with a beacon leading you to the targets you need to defeat in order to complete the stage. You have a basic fireball as well as a freaking homing attack. It took me a bit longer than it should have to figure out this was an option, but it was by far one of the most satisfying things to do in this game. I mean, just take a look at this. Then there's the ground combat. I don't even know where to start. Let's drop into a level and talk about things as we see them. Well, first things first, there's not really a lot going on here. Initially, I wanted to chalk this up to just being hardware limitations, but I don't know how true this is. It's very clear that they wanted to go for a large-scale, grand battle with one man against an army. And oh, speak of the army, here they are. There's plenty of numbers, but not a lot of variety. Throughout the entire game, you'll meet maybe a handful of different troops with slightly different abilities. It really doesn't matter, except for a difference in HP and how far away they can hit you. If you haven't noticed yet, Kaim doesn't have a very large set of moves. Square is your basic attack, triangle is your magic, and you can do a cool little special if you hit triangle while your sword glows. That's it. Now, you do have an interesting variety of weapons to choose from, each with a different magic spell associated with them, but honestly, other than swords, they all kinda suck. They're all either too slow or have bad reach. On top of that, in order for a weapon to have a combo longer than 3 swings, you have to level it up, meaning if you unlock a new weapon and want to use it, you'll be putting yourself at a severe disadvantage going into the next chapter unless you level it beforehand by grinding. And if you can't tell by the footage yet, grinding is very, very boring and time-consuming. I ended up playing through the entire game up until the second ending with the starting sword because I didn't want to waste any more time leveling up on another. Oh, also, the amount of magic you have at your disposal is linked to your weapons level, not yours. Speaking of magic, let's talk about one of the most BS and abused mechanics of these levels. You see this guy? See how his armor is red? That means when he's attacked with magic, he'll reflect it back at you, including your dragon's flames. I would have mentioned that you can use your dragon sooner, but because of these guys, I barely got to use them anyway. It only takes 4 or 5 shots from these guys to gank you off your dragon and surround you. And if you get surrounded at any point by any enemy, red or black, you're done for. The hit stun in this game is ridiculous, coupled with the fact that you have to get up off of the ground after getting knocked down, means if you go down in a crowd, you're not getting back up. Now, there's 2 things you can do if you get into this situation. You can block, in which case you will still take damage, or you can dodge. Now, dodging sounds great, except for one thing. Dodging is tied to R1 and L1, which means you can only dodge left or right. Combine that with the extremely tight camera angle and the fact that whoever designed the camera decided to connect it to you using a rubber band, causing it to whip back directly behind you the moment you let go and not let you rotate it a full 360 degrees, and you're in for a bad time. Add on top of this a very vague guide of what goals you're supposed to complete and an expected completion time of close to an hour for some levels, and you have a very bad time ahead of you. I'd say more than 90% of my playthrough of this game was me getting stuck in death loops and getting lost in these huge levels. Oh, there's also no checkpoints. If you die after 30 minutes, if you die 10 feet away from the final goal, that doesn't matter. Screw you, try again. Drakengard's story is a very slow burn in the beginning. Cutscenes called events happen intermittently throughout the several chapters of the game. The first 3 or so are the worst to get through. Your goal when you first set out is simple. There are 3 seals throughout the land that the evil empire is trying to break, which will allow them to bring about a calamity. You need to catch up to them at each location and try to stop them from doing so, and also save any victims of their attacks along the way. In a decent twist, you fail to do so consistently while making other screw-ups along the way. Inuart, Kaim's sister's fiancé, is captured en route to the second seal after your crew fails to stop them from breaking the first one. He's then brainwashed into working for the Empire, causing him to kidnap Furii using a dragon of his own. I, for the life of me, cannot remember if where the dragon comes from is explained. I just know everyone in the universe thinks it's mad crazy he has a black one. Now, while that is happening, the second seal is also broken. Kaim goes into an even deeper rage than what he was already in and is hellbent on saving his sister no matter who gets in the way. From here, we get a few nuggets of interesting story as Kaim rushes headfirst into the Empire's forces with the sole goal of rescuing Furii. We see a cutscene of all the Empire's forces going insane, and gigantic golems spread out amongst the troops. Another battle occurs, and as things look like they're all coming up for Kaim, the Empire succeeds in breaking the seals, and the sky turns red. We're pulled back onto the battlefield as undead soldiers join the battle. A flying fortress is discovered to be the headquarters of the Empire, where they're holding Furii. Kaim battles his way through the fortress to find Furii in a ceremonial chamber, along with a child speaking in a very, deep voice.
Speak not the watchers, draw not the watchers, write not the watchers, sculpt not the...
The child kills Furii with a knife, causing Inuart to go into a blind rage as he steals her body and flies away on his dragon. Kaim gives chase after Inuart, they have a dragon fight, Inuart runs away after losing, and you don't see him again. With all of the seals broken and the goddess killed, there's nothing left to hold back the calamity known as the Seeds of Destruction. The sky turns red again, and the crew fly to the capital city to try and stop things from getting worse. Once they get there, they find a giant freaky dragon in the sky above the city. Kaim defeats it, and suddenly, after being kind of a dick like the entire game, Kaim's dragon is like super into this murder thing, and also Kaim. Kaim fights his way to the temple in the city, breaks into the temple, kills all of the enemies that are protecting the child, and captures her. In a surprise turn of events, Kaim decides that he should not kill this child who has caused all of this damage, despite her begging him to. At this point, everyone's aware that she was being possessed, but they still decide to punish her anyway by allowing her to live with the guilt of the millions that she killed, despite not being in control of her actions.
No. You will suffer under the unbearable weight of your crimes. You are beyond hope.
No, Mother! I'm sorry. I won't do it again. I promise.
With the bad guy beaten, and Kaim and the dragon being all chill now, all that's left is to figure out how to put back the seals so that this can't happen again. And the dragon volunteers to become the seal. Now, I don't know what the rules are for becoming a seal, but up until this point, they have all been locations, not people or living creatures. The goddess was a human, but she wasn't a seal. She was something different. And when the dragon becomes the seal, her body disintegrates. This is supposed to be this heart-wrenching moment, but Kaim and the dragon basically hated each other until the very end, and then suddenly they're buddy-buddy. Also, none of the other seals disintegrate. Why haven't they always done that? If they did, then none of this would have happened, because then the seals wouldn't have been able to be broken. Either way, the dragon sacrifices herself, peace is restored, and Kaim is alone to live with his decisions he made for the rest of his life.
Ye gods, is it your will that we should live on?
The credits roll, you get some closure, and then this happens. Now, I knew this was coming, but I can just imagine how that must have felt for people who didn't know or weren't paying attention. So to briefly explain, there are 5 different endings named A through E. A is the basic ending you get for doing the bare minimum, only playing the verses that are available to you and nothing else. B and C are unlocked by beating levels in a certain amount of time. And D, on the other hand, is the most complete story experience. In order to get this one, you have to complete all of the chapters and find all 3 of the allies that you can unlock, as well as complete their side stories. Now, the way I understand how these 2 work is that each ending represents a different timeline. After playing through ending D, I originally thought maybe since I was just playing chapters I hadn't before, I was just seeing an abridged version of the story. There were plenty of holes in the plot that seemed like they needed to be filled, And to a degree, they did, but no. B and C are the easiest to explain since their stories diverge from A pretty late into the game. In order to get ending B, all you need to do is beat the final fight against Inuart in 4 minutes or less. Afterwards, Kaim will continue to follow him down into the city instead of fighting the big dragon from last time. Due to time shenanigans and how video games with branching paths tend to be, I'm not sure if this means the big dragon never happens or if Kaim just ignores it out of anger. Either way, once you reach the city, Inuart reveals he plans on reviving Furii using one of the seeds of destruction that has fallen on the ground. You fight Inuart once again. Even though you defeat him, he's still able to put her in the seed for some reason, and she hatches out of the seed as some sort of demonic angel thing with lots of arms and stuff. Now, Kaim now has to fight the abomination that was once his sister. Afterwards, you see Kaim standing with his dead-again sister in his arms while more copies of her fly into the air.
The seeds never were, and mankind remains unforgiven.
And then the credits roll. C is another timed event. If you can beat Inuart in under 4 minutes again in the second battle, Kaim will successfully kill him before he can place Furii in the seed. Somehow this leads to the little girl Mana turning Kaim's dragon into this metal as hell looking dragon, and I think taking control of her. This is one of the vaguer endings, and that says a lot. At this point, I was seeing too much red to think too deeply on it. You now have to kill your dragon in one of the only ground combat boss battles in the game. This fight was the final straw that caused me to go back and grind for hours so that I could actually stand a chance against this thing. Because guess what? It has all the moves it had when you flew on it. Not the ground combat dragon moves, the air combat dragon moves, including the homing attack. After Kaim kills his best friend and watches his sister die, he now has to kill the only thing left that cared about him.
You have become strong.
Once the dragon falls, Kaim discovers that all of the dragons are now attacking the realm and runs into the sunset to continue his unending battle. In order to talk about ending D, we need to go all the way back to Chapter 2, which I may have glossed over a tiny bit since it's not nearly as important in ending A as it is here. After the attack on Kaim's castle, he and his crew head to the forests where the elves live in order to protect the seal that's there. During this chapter, we meet our first ally, Leonard. Leonard lost his entire village during one of the attacks and blames himself. He attempts to take his own life, but fails. A fairy approaches him in his darkest hour and offers a pact with him. In return for the pact, Leonard loses his sight. In order to meet Leonard, you need to make the decision to investigate the village instead of running further into the level and continuing what you think is the main story back in the timeline of ending A. This is the setup for most of what happens in this timeline. You are seeing events that could have happened had Kaim not been as selfish and used a bit more tact in his quest for revenge. In 3 separate chapters, there are certain things that you can do as Kaim to trigger events that will take you into a sub-story that takes place either in between certain original events or in some cases instead of them. In the 2nd chapter, you pick up Leonard. He's a sad man in the woods who sold his eyesight to a fairy. You help him out and you kill a bunch of literally children fighting against their will. Then you go to the desert and save a prisoner of war named Ariok. She's been endlessly tortured and gives away her womb to, I think, they're fire and ice nymphs, but don't worry, even though she's lost most of her ability to think from the torture and is now a cannibal who eats babies, she was chill with it because her kids were killed and she doesn't want new ones. Lastly, you meet a little boy by the name of Sere, who gave his time to a golem. Yes, his time. He can no longer age because of this. If he looks familiar, it's because his sister is Mana, the little priestess girl who has successfully fucked up the world 3 times at this point. Sere gets kidnapped and you rescue him, leading to a delay in Kaim reaching one of the things he normally does. So things are going pretty bad. Kaim gets to the fortress like he always does and attempts to stop the ritual death of his sister again. Mana is captured and Sere learns he can't save his sister and kills her. And then giant babies happen. Literally, giant babies descend from the sky. Kaim, with the help of his team, tries to stop the baby invasion. Ariok, who likes to eat kids, sacrifices herself as a distraction and dies in a pile of babies. Leonard also sacrifices himself, leaving the priest who's just kind of whining the whole time through all of the different possible outcomes, Kaim and Sere. When Ariok died, a giant pregnant lady appeared. From what I read, it's not completely clear that this is Ariok, but come on. The giant pregnant lady is basically a giant time bomb, and when the time bomb goes off, the entire world will end. And no, I don't mean time bomb as in there's a timed delay. I mean she is a bomb made of time. Sere remembers a story his mother told him, who conveniently was able to sacrifice his time in order to save the world. So that's what he does. He severs his pact with his golem, uses his time to defeat the giant pregnant lady. Kaim flies Sere near the lady so that he can do a halo jump towards her. He unleashes his time, causing her to freeze in time for eternity. While this is happening, Kaim and the priest are shot out of the sky and die. Sere dies from releasing his time, and the world is saved thanks to the sacrifices of all of the noble heroes.
Will you forgive me now, Mana?
Now, before we get to the ending that matters, I need to take a second to elaborate on some things. First, the ending I just told you is technically the true ending. When this game was released, Nier was not even a thought in the creators' minds. Although everyone dies, this is the only ending where the world isn't destroyed or still in chaos. Second, the next ending, which is the one that leads into Nier, was a joke. If the interview I read on Wikipedia is true, the giant pregnant lady was supposed to be revealed to be a famous pop idol in Japan at the time of the game's creation. That ended up not happening, but the ending was finished and put in anyway. You do not need to suffer through this game. It has basically nothing to do with it except for this one 5-minute battle that could take you literally days to beat. Yes, I just said days. In order to even unlock this ending, you have to find all 64 of the weapons in the game. Some are random drops, some are bonuses for completing certain levels in a certain amount of time. I only cheated twice in my entire playthrough, and this was one of them. I had already put in close to a month on this game, and I did not want to spend another. So I went online and I downloaded some kind soul's fully 100%ed file of this game. Thank you, Darkloud from GameFAQs, wherever you are. Okay, so you beat all the other endings, grinded for hours to find all the weapons. What happens next? In ending E, instead of Sere sacrificing himself, Kaim attacks the lady, directly leading to all of the time it had consumed to be released, launching both the lady and Kaim into modern-day Tokyo.
Is this the land of the gods?
I know I already talked about gameplay, but this sequence does not use any of the systems already in the game. In this fight, you are circling the lady as she sends out rings that instantly kill you. If you try to shoot her... Oh, what's that? You made your own ring that looks like hers. Maybe you can use your special attack? Nope, that makes a different colored ring. So you need to match your ring color to hers and survive until the timer runs out. Yeah, basically a rhythm game, and a ridiculously hard one at that. If you get hit once by a ring, you die. There's no checkpoints. So if you die, you have to start the whole thing over again. Now, I was a good boy the entire game. I played this game up until this point, but I was mentally and emotionally exhausted by the endurance run I had made of this game. And I have to admit, this level broke me. I save scummed the shit out of this fight. If I got even 10 seconds further than my previous death, I would save state. And even doing that, this fight still took me about an hour. So Kaim defeats the pop idol goddess of death. And he immediately gets shot out of the sky by a fighter jet. Kaim and the dragon's bodies free fall through the sky and are impaled by a skyscraper. The giant pop idol disintegrates to ash, and the game ends.
It is done.
This is Bravo 1. Unidentified target has been neutralized. Over and out.
That's it. That's the ending. I was beyond frustrated almost the entire time I played this game, but by the end, I was just left sort of burned out. Near the middle of my playthrough, I had a breakthrough. After finishing the third ending, where you kill your sister and the credits roll, a hauntingly beautiful song plays. As I listened to it, I began to realize that I was listening from the perspective of Kaim's sister, and I got drawn in. For the first time since the beginning of the game, I was immersed.
This didn't happen for the last ending, did it? I don't think it did.
And as the song played, this cool little reversed audio track played just as the songs used in the game started to scroll by. They were all classic songs that I recognized. At this point, I had played a majority of the game but hadn't heard any of them. Then it hit me. In the back of the song, there was this pulsing rhythm of strings. It was a looping sample. Up until this point, the music had been sparse and repetitive. Mainly, this looping track was the only thing you really heard, and it drove me insane. I originally chalked this up to my emulation being busted, but now I understood that it was intentional. This was the first time that I sat aside my anger and reflected on what I was playing. This game, just like any other, was art. I felt bad for all the criticisms that I had laid on it. Like I said, this game was from 2003. The hardware they had was nowhere near what we have today, but they still created something unlike any of the games that had come out at that time. I began to realize that I'd never get to enjoy this game as it was intended because I was spoiled. In my excitement, I learned what ending I needed to play to know what I needed to know. But I was spoiled in another way. I had played arguably the best game Yoko Taro has ever created to date after years of honing his craft, and then went back to his first attempt at writing a video game and expected it to be just as good. It's really hard for me to look at this game objectively as it was originally intended to be, a standalone title, and not as what it became, a part of a whole that was created later. With that said, I have a few more thoughts on this game that I think could have been said about this game both then and now. I stand by what I said before about gameplay. This game was clearly ambitious, and I think it bit off more than it could chew by including two different types of combat. And I think that can be seen pretty clearly by how underdeveloped both of them seem to be. Had they just stuck with either one and fleshed it out more, chances are the core gameplay would have felt much better. I've already complimented the music quite a bit, but I want to take a second to dive deeper into it. Apparently, the composer's goal with the music was to instill a sense of madness. And it does it well. The music's repetitive and bare nature left me feeling angry. Add the unintentional bonus of the frustrating gameplay, and you had one angry boy. But aside from the sister song, that's all it achieved. The soundtrack is definitely memorable, but it isn't something that I'd ever go back and listen to by choice, despite how well it was produced. The story is extremely dark. In its time, it would have been considered groundbreaking and pushing the boundaries. But it was the beginning of a trend in video games to do so. This amount of edginess is the butt of almost every joke looking back on the 2000s, and it really doesn't do anything special aside from being edgy for the sake of being edgy. I learned about some of this after reading the wiki, since even the US version isn't the full story. In this one game, you have revenge, war, incest, rape, pedophilia, child soldiers, actively participating in killing those child soldiers, assorted war crimes, and more. One of these is usually enough on its own, and I get that they really wanted to drive home the themes of reaping what you sow and all of that, but these themes were never gone into with enough depth for them to be part of the story. Aside from that, the overall story is a classic tragedy. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that, and I think that the repeating process of seeing Kaim's failures due to his selfishness is really cool. The multiple endings help us understand that unless Kaim is willing to ask for help and think of others, he will always fail. But some of the scenes could definitely have been trimmed out without hurting the overall experience. My mistake in playing this game for the secret ending ruined my entire experience of an already middle-of-the-road game. But if it hadn't been for that goal, I probably never would have picked it up again, let alone finished all of the endings. Drakengard was an ambitious title by an ambitious group of creators that wanted to try to make something different, and they succeeded. With the experience that they gained from it, they were able to climb higher up the ladder and make better and better stories for people to enjoy. This was the origin of their series, as well as their own origin. For that reason, it will always be an important part of the lore. But in my opinion, that's where its value ends. If you want to know more about the importance of this game's events and how they relate to the greater story, read the wikis, watch videos on YouTube of timelines and supercuts of the cutscenes. You can get everything you need to know without putting a finger on this game. And if after all that you think it's still worth a shot, go for it. But as for me, I'd be happy to never touch it again. 6 out of 10.